and good afternoon. For those of us in smoky California, I hope you're safe and doing okay. Uh, and good evening to those of us who are in East Coast. Good late evening to Austria. Linz, thank you, Ars Electronica, for hosting us. And we jumped to New York today, New York City, Tribeca, to meet with Toni Dove, who I have known for quite a while and always admired her work because she was always in that in-between space that I can relate to and I love. And her work with interactive cinema was way ahead of time. I think whatever you do, Toni, is a bit ahead of time. But the hybridity of performance and installation and film really is fused in narrative and storytelling that's kind of in a quantum realm where it's definitely not linear. It definitely involves the audience, the body, and explores different ways of storytelling and how we accept this. So, with a very short intro, I'd like to save as much time as possible for Toni to talk to us about how you're doing now in this very strange, surreal time, and then show us around. And thank you so much for letting us enter your studio. How exciting!
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure. And a pleasure to get a chance to talk to the Ars Electronica group, and always a pleasure to talk to you. So I guess you wanted to talk just a little bit about how things have changed in this given moment, and I would say it's been interesting. It's been a challenge because I usually work with teams of people, and to be able to do that in this moment has been challenging. I work a lot with Team Viewer, with FaceTime. We're figuring out different things that we can do and things that we can't do. I can't go into a motion capture lab right now. I can't. So it's been a challenge, and also in terms of thinking about making presentations that are work in progress presentations. How many people can you gather in a room if you're working with interactive installations? And I've started to think of this piece now, this new piece that I'm working on, as something that will be 6 people, and largely because of the potential of this quarantine going on for a period of time. And then also looking at on possible iterations of the work online and looking at the upcoming technologies. And that's something Victoria and I are working on with HarvestWorks, developing a sound instrument that can work both in real space, but also can do some interesting sound spatialization and binaural sound spatialization online. So on that note, I think I'll start the presentation. I'm going to take us to a keynote presentation, and I'm going to walk through work starting from the early 90s, looking at embodied interface as a form. Starting here with a virtual reality project, probably one of the first narrative virtual reality projects, probably one of the first virtual reality projects, period. It was in 1992 at the Banff Centre for the Arts in Canada. And we started developing, looking at the piece, but I really didn't want to work with the headset because I didn't like the isolation of it. I still don't like the isolation of that interface. So we were looking at different performative ways of working with that. And I became fascinated. It was the first time I'd worked with anything interactive. And I became fascinated with this idea of responsive environments and of embodied interface, of the idea of somatically connecting the human body to narrative time. And that feedback loop that happens between the body and material, and how proprioception, perception, the visceral aspects of our bodies that we use on a daily basis can be used to trigger and work with media. So that started to really interest me, that embodied interface idea. And the Banff centerpiece was fun. It was computers were the size of refrigerators and they were purple and they needed their own chilled rooms. And then I went on in the 90s, in the late 90s, to do my first interactive cinema project. And I had become at this point really interested in this idea of really transparent interface, of being able to not wear anything or have a head, anything on you, or sandwich boards or flashing lights or colored dots or anything. So this project was called Artificial Changelings, and it was there were floor pads. You can see there's a lit floor pad she's standing on that says Dream Trance, and you would walk across the floor pads. It would be Dream Trance, direct address, where you'd be almost in conversation with the character, and then an interior space, one at the top, that would allow you inside the character's head. And then the small square one in the back that was a time tunnel that would take you to a different century in the story. The piece was written at the very beginnings of the World Wide Web, and I was looking at it as I could see it developing as a potential shopping mall. And the piece is about a kleptomaniac in 19th century Paris during the rise of the department store, who's dreaming about an encryption hacker in the future. And you could move back and forth between the two centuries. You navigated almost like a mixer with the floor pads, but then your body movement, the way you moved your arms and twisted your body would move the character's body, generate sound and different sonic images, and alter the environment through your body movement. I started to think of it as the uncanny interface, because people would talk to me about the feeling of it being almost like an out-of-body experience. And I thought, or the Vulcan mind meld, where there's that sense they had of suddenly getting stuck to a character. So what starts to happen is a kind of doubling, where you're in your body and in the screen at the same time, and it's as if there's this extruded connection happening between you and the screen, which is not the norm in cinema. And that fascinated me, and that idea of it creating this uncanny sensation, I thought would be a really interesting thing to use, if you were colliding with the different kinds of narrative genres, that you could take that uncanny interface and this idea that you as the viewer were haunting the movie, and combine that with genre into something that was really interesting. So from there I went to Spectropia, which is a feature film that's performed for an audience again across 3 screens. Luc Dubois was a software designer, and he and I perform it for an audience. The most recently was a year or 2 ago at the Ringling Museum, where I had a retrospective of 20 years of interactive work, and we remounted it there. It's been consistently going out ever since it launched in 2008. I was interested in this piece in creating an entire narrative arc, taking you through a whole feature film. So this is a 90-minute feature film, essentially, but we are inhabiting characters and cooperating to make the movie unfold. We're constantly scrubbing and selecting between up to 6 streams of video. The story is about Spectropia, who lives in a culture in the future where there's no recorded history and saving anything is punishable by law. And she lives with a character called the Duck, who's runs a black market business in retro objects. And they live in the salvage zone outside of an urban center where all the garbage is collected, and they're lifting the island above sea level because the water is rising. She's built a machine, a scanning machine that scans garbage and creates virtual realities from the moment of the time that the garbage was created. And there's a glitch in her machine, and she ends up in the body of another woman in 1931 in New York City, right after the stock market crash. At this point, I was looking, it was the middle of the dot-com boom, the explosion, and I was looking around me and seeing young adults graduating from art schools and into a work environment where they had never experienced anything but a boom economy. So I did this piece about the Depression that I worked on for a period of almost 8 years. And by the time it launched, we'd had the 2008 crash. So the whole piece, the whole experience of developing the piece over time became this odd experience in tandem with the economics that were happening in the world. I'm going to show you a couple of excerpts. The first that show a little bit about the interactive environment of the piece. The first shows Sally Rand, the fan and bubble dancer, and you can see me reanimating her dance with gesture and arm movement, and Luke is typing into her. She's a text-to-speech puppet, so he types things for her to say on the fly in real time, or we could pre-record things. In the second clip, you'll see Spectropia has found herself in the body of Verna in 1931, and she's following William, her boyfriend, to see what's going on and trying to navigate this new universe. And you can see Luke and I can exchange who's got control of the character. We can be inside the character's head, seeing out of their eyes, or we can be following them or leading them, or kind of eavesdropping from a distance. And then there's a dialogue where you can hear what people aren't saying to each other. You can manipulate the speed and rhythm of the conversation they're having, and you can step outside and look at them from a distance and see them, essentially eavesdrop on them. So now I'm going to quickly play this clip.
Toni Dove and Luke Dubois use motion sensing. Their body movements will move characters or navigate through space and alter sound. They're the Deus Ex Machina. We're the puppet show. Watch Toni again. She's pulling my strings when she moves her hands in the air. She thinks she's in control, but I have the last word. You'll see.
Where's he going? If I follow him, I might find out something about him. He's very slick.
I can't believe I didn't get those contracts off.
She's certainly very strange.
Gotta be careful. I don't want anyone keeping an eye on me while I'm trying to pull off this deal. I need to be a
What is the
free.
point of these shoes? They aren't so easy to walk in. And the net on this hat makes me want to sneeze. It's so unfamiliar here.
Hey, Eddie, I had to sneak out of the house.
Oh?
Yeah, she fell asleep.
I've had a rather interesting day myself, William.
Hey, what do you got? Did X leave a trail?
He certainly did. The man could not keep his pants on. If his wife knew the half of it, she'd be angry at him about more than missing assets.
Keeping secrets?
There are a lot of layers to this thing.
Don't touch me. Don't touch me. I'm delicate. You'll screw it up.
What do you do?
I make coffee. You know coffee.
You want a cup of coffee?
Ah, coffee, yeah, sure.
You look rumpled this morning.
Oh,
Feeling any better?
I'm fine, just a little tired from yesterday, I guess.
Hey, Vernon. Guess what? I've got a new case for us. Remember X? Well, he was a crook, right? When he skimmed all that money off the XYZ, I think he stashed some of it. Maybe a big chunk. We can find it, we can pay back your dad and his clients.
This body is strange. Like I'm wearing a costume. I'm inside it, and I'm peering out. But there are these alien sensations that are so disturbing.
It's very delicate. I can't tell her everything, but I need for her to believe me. The best way
There's
will
so
be to
much
tell her
that's
part of the
unfamiliar.
story, but not the whole
As if they
deal.
speak a slightly different language, close, but different enough so a mistake could be fatal.
It'll be best.
When he stole all that money, where do you think he hid it?
No, I doubt he had a bank account under his own name. Yeah, too easy to trace.
So many secrets.
Yeah, I hope his secrets didn't die with him. I doubt official records will help. Maybe the investors of the original fund.
The investors, so there's a record? I mean, that could give us some leads.
Well, there's still an XYZ company, but there's not much to it. We could go there.
They just gonna give us the investors list?
No. No, we can sneak in when they close. And we can hide in the basement and wait until dark.
Pick the lock. Well, that's the way we've got to do it. Let's do it.
Now, we have to be careful. This could be very dangerous. Someone else may be looking for the same thing.
You mean someone's watching us?
Well, you never know. This could be worth a lot of money. We just can't tell anyone.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm really good at evading invisible forces. It's right up my alley.
Well, let's go. Anna, did you change your hair or something? Well, go get ready.
So after Spectropia, which was a real experiment in taking the whole spectrum of a feature film narrative apart and putting it back together again, almost like I had disassembled a pocket watch and assembled it in a completely different way, making some other engine that measured not time, but something else. I started to think about coming back to something I had been working with before I did interactivity, which is bringing the movie off the wall and into the room with you, creating a kind of dimensionality, but not doing that with like a headset or something that created the illusion of depth, but physically actually bringing that kind of sense of almost like holography into the room with you. And this piece is called Lucid Possession. And it combined live music and performance with narrative and three-dimensional robotic screens. All of it was networked and controlled on stage. Hai-Ting Chin was the mezzo-soprano. She also starred in the piece. Todd Reynolds live scored it, and I'm on stage here on the corner using motion sensing to control what's happening across multiple screens. The story is about Bean, who is a programmer of smart personalities. And she's created an avatar that goes viral on the internet, and it brings her a lot of attention that increases her anxiety. And her programming skills are so finely tuned that her head has become like a radio receiver without the technology, or a Twitter feed without the technology. She can overhear people think. And as her anxiety builds, she starts to pick up the ghost of a woman who lived in her same building, in where her studio is in the 19th century. And that place was, of course, my studio, where we had created the set for Bean's studio. And so the piece became a kind of meditation on noise management, on the way that we navigate simultaneously all these different analog and digital environments simultaneously. And and what that meant, and how those worlds bleed together, and how we represent ourselves in those worlds, and what is the difference between conversation and performance, and between community and audience. And so I started to examine some of those things with this project, and it was also in the technology itself. It was this sort of experiment in networked technology and in creating essentially this human-operated engine that would tell this story. I started to think of it as cinematic bunraku, because Haiting would be the voice, Todd would be the live soundtrack, I would be manipulating things. There were live screens that would open and close and change, and somehow the whole thing came together in the moment of performance, but it didn't really exist until that moment, or it was only fragments or pieces before that. So that fascinated me. And this is the first 3 minutes.
My head got stuffed with people.
Something's going down. You know what it's been like since it went viral.
Static, noise.
Blackouts. There's something I haven't told you. The blank spaces have started to fill up with something. Actually, somebody else.
There's a
Blackout, but then there's noise. And suddenly I'm seeing out of somebody else's eyes. In some other time. And it feels like something's chasing me. Why am I here? To be haunted? I wake suddenly from a dream. Am I going mad? What does she want? Haunted. Haunted. What does she want? She doesn't see. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors beyond the material place. Haunted. Haunted. I'm losing ground, waiting.
As a result of doing this piece, I got really involved with the whole process of building the screens and of working with the LED costumes and some of the robotic creatures that we created for the set. Because the production itself was a fairly large scale and involved process, I didn't really get a chance to zero in on some of this stuff as much as I would have liked. So we went through the process of first building the first screen and then adding the cinema screen and the floor screens and going through iterations, which is what I usually do. My story and the engine that I'm going to, the human operated engine or instrument that I'm going to build to play the story, kind of develop as a conversation together. And in this case, we also were building these small robots, some of which were in the theater piece, some of them were in the film part of it, some of them were animated in different ways. And some of these characters were on screen, and then Hai Ting wore this skirt in performance. And this was pretty early on, and Adafruit had not created, a lot of the technologies that made it really easy to do LED costumes. We had somebody on set. We had a guy on set who was running around after our actors with a soldering gun. Excuse me, I've got a cat photo bomb happening here. So I got fascinated with these things, and I thought I wanted to focus in on it and try to use it do an installation piece again, focus in on something that was driven by someone off the street rather than someone who was using the engine as if it were a sophisticated instrument. So I wanted to go back to installation format, and I started to develop this piece called The Dress That Eats Souls. And The Dress That Eats Souls is an installation the dress is an artifact. And I was looking at this sort of visceral relationship of the human body and technology over 200 years. And it seemed like representing it with clothing seemed like to represent to me that kind of intimacy. The dress is this sort of supernatural artifact, and people have worn it over 200 years, and it's essentially kind of eaten them and eaten their stories. And the piece uses, it has a robotic element that mirrors your body movement. So it behaves as if you're wearing it. And then it shows you on a CinemaScope screen overhead, you look at out of the eyes of all these different people who've worn it over 10 decades. There are 10 decades in the piece. There are 3 versions of every decade. And then the piece analyzes each viewer's body movements, and it makes selections about what you will see. So depending on how you move, it'll decide whether you see something like a light version of a decade, a dark version of the decade, or something that's more focused on technology and the technique. So I worked with Brooklyn Research doing development, and sorry, this is. So we started just in these are some of the early days of working with the servo. I thought the knife at the end of the arm was a nice touch. And then we worked on creating a maquette using the Kinect. And was looking at the layers of projection on the skirt and then how the Kinect would see your head. So this is Tommy Martinez, the programmer for the project, moving his head, and you could see the Kinect seeing it as a cube. And then we did different tests so that your head movement would be able to look at a scene and see straight ahead, up, straight ahead, down, right, straight ahead, and then left. And the idea was that I wanted you to be able to have the kind of experience that you would have in a VR situation where you could navigate a space and be in an environment while you heard this voice whispered in your ear, as if you were wearing the dress, seeing out of the eyes of someone who had worn it and hearing their voice in your ear. But I wanted to do it in a way so that other people could sit there and have the experience with you, that one person at a time would drive for an audience. And so I just decided on this format. I worked with a group of students at Parsons School of Design to start developing the look of it. We had a lot of fun doing that. And then Brooklyn Research started helping me build the final version. They designed, well, we worked together to design the body armor, and then they designed the robotics. My cat Fairbanks helped. We built, we used a vinyl cutter to create these pyramids that were glued and taped together and then riveted and then ultimately formed part of the clothing of the dress, and were eventually lined with LEDs that could be programmed so that every decade and every aspect of every decade had slightly different coloration that would change as you moved through time. And this is the almost final piece in my studio. The overhead screen is foam core in this version on C-stands, and in the final installation, it's a suspended rear projection screen. And this is 1918. It started in 1918 and went into the future. This is the 1940s. This is the 1950s. This is the future, storms. And I'm going to show you just a short clip from it. It doesn't take you through the whole narrative experience, which each person goes through 5 of the 10 decades, a segment each for 5 of the 10 decades. And it takes about 13 minutes, but this is just a short 3-minute clip.
I'm watching you. How you move will decide what you see. If you let me, I'll tell my story with your body. Now move your head right to left. Do you feel it? You are wearing me. You are inside me, inside the dress. Here we go.
From the age of 6, I was strapped in a metal corset to fix the curvature of the spine. My mother and my nurse carried me to the living room when we threw a party, and I watched from above the dancing, the piano playing.
See what I can do?
Massive car bomb exploded outside the story of incredible compassion. Once again,
Where are you? Where are you? This irritates me. Only your conversation feeds me. Overhearing is erotic when I stay secret. X and 0101.00 and what? The dark indicates. The dark indicates cold and X. Cold indicates. There you are, you. You are mine. You are incorporated. You are inside the dress. And I can make you vanish. Now you may leave. Go away. I'm so over you.
So the the dress was a lot of fun to work on, actually, and she was very bossy, and it was one of the things that made the interface really seamless. And the fact that she was slightly taller than you, and you both moved your body to sync with her, and then you would move your head to see the overhead screen. The whole thing made you feel as if you were being lifted up inside it in a way. It was quite interesting. And after I finished it, I thought I could keep going with this. I had this desire to make her smarter, to allow your engagement with her to form more of a conversation. And I thought, well, I could go that direction, or I could start and think about working on something new. And I had been working on the dress for about 3 years, so I decided that I would at the very least, pause it, and at the most just move on, and start to do something new. The dress also was the end of a period of time, kind of a closure for a whole segment of work, because I had a retrospective at the Ringling Museum of Art that was curated by Matthew McClendon. And it covered 20 years of interactive projects. And in the process of which I sort of reintroduced myself and reconnected to all that work and looked at it and had a chance to kind of digest it and think about it. And so when I finished that and came out and did a little bit of renovation on my studio, which is why it looks like an empty basketball court behind me, I started to think about what kinds of things that I'd like to do with the next project. This next piece is called Sunjammer 6, A Tale Blown by a Solar Breeze. And it's a visual movie, a visual novel, and a human-operated machine, which is familiar by now that I build instruments. It's loosely based on Greek tragedy. It's comprised of 2 characters and a chorus. It's a love story, a conversation in mathematics between 2 virtual characters connecting across time, each pushing back against a dark age. Hypatia, the Hellenistic astronomer, mathematician, and philosopher, who was assassinated by a group of rogue Christian monks in 415 AD, is one character, and the other is a fictional character set 10 years in the future named after Kepler Redux, who's a NASA engineer working on solar sail technology and sustainable energy resources. And I'm thinking about them both each pushing back against a dark age. He's coming up against the carbon fuel industry still. The first stage of development is focused on Hypatia and in creating a character, a responsive character that will be driven by machine learning. I'm an artist in residence at Bell Labs with their Experiment Arts and Technology program, also at Integrated Digital Media at NYU and at Pioneer Works, and they're all helping with development for this project. We're building a tracking system, a machine learning tracking system that will recognize human gesture and mass and direction and history of movement. So I'm fascinated over the years. I've become fascinated in how we read body language in each other, and how that informs my ideas about embodied interface, and what possibilities exist to regain control of intelligent systems on modest levels of practice with smaller, more customized data sets in order to create, more critical and experimental view of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So this project is a bit of an experiment with this. This is early sketch of developing the look and the responsive nature of the Hypatia character. We're learning, we're just beginning to develop the machine learning system, the recognition system. When we're not using that yet, we're still training it. So this, I just used a Connect to start to create both mirroring and responsiveness. So we're starting to build a vocabulary for how a character might respond to people in a room. I wanted to break down the frontal relationship to screens that had been pretty prevalent all the way through my work, either through an installation-based situation or in an audience-based situation in a performance, because I've worked pretty consistently back and forth between performance and installation. So I wanted to create a character that could move around 3 walls of a room. And in the context of COVID, we're looking at just 6 people in a room, being able to track 6 people in a room. Eventually the piece will be 2 rooms that you move through sequentially so that it's sensitive to the current issues of the moment. But then these 6 people, the character will react to them, move around the room, respond to them. And I'm looking at different kinds of dimensional scrim material and different kinds of possibilities for creating an illusion, more of an illusion of dimension in the character. So that brings me to the end of my keynote conversation, and back to you, Victoria.
So nice to get this kind of overview that I'm familiar with, but I haven't seen you actually presented as a thread, and it seems like one just flows into the next, to the next, to the next. And your studio looks really nice and clean. I'm so used to like a bunch of stuff there.
I mean, it was, yeah, right before this cleanup happened. That's also the little sketch of the character there.
Oh, I love that.
In the background, she's sort of yeah. Before it was, I was feeling like like I was becoming a portrait of a hoarder. So it's been sort of both very nice and a little bit disconcerting to have a studio that looks like an empty basketball court.
Techno hoarder. Well, it's looking really beautiful, and I really appreciate having this overview. I think a lot of people are not even aware of the amount of amazing work you've been doing, and it's pretty shocking that you've never even participated in Ars Electronica. I just realized
this is my first interaction. I've been around a lot, but not there. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's good to introduce you to that audience, and I'm happy to have that opportunity. So thank you for taking the time and for setting it up for us. I know it took some effort. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to get started on our experiments with.
Yeah, me too. It's been quite interesting work, like this whole Zoom environment.
Yes.
Sort of grappling with it and thinking about what the technology is and how you could use it and what kind of intimacy it creates for live work and performance. And it's kind of it's challenging, but because everybody, I think, is sick of Zoom, because if you're teaching or you have meetings or you're on boards or you're this or that, you're zoomed out at this point. But at the same time, I think it has tremendous interesting potential so these horrible moments also are kind of rife with fascinating opportunities that
I know. And on that positive, optimistic note,
yes.
Let's see. How else could we have entered into your studio unless we were in this time? So even if the technology was there, our frame of mind wasn't.
Yes, exactly.
Because we're quarantined, there's kind of a need to get out, and to get out for me,
connecting with each other. Yeah,
exactly. And to get out for me now with all this stuff going on in California is just such a pleasure.
You're in a different kind of climate catastrophe.
Yes.
And New York went through this period where it was the epicenter of the virus, and now it's been very, very low. We're gradually opening up. It's more like Europe here now. But we've gone through these different sort of parallel horrors at different points where we're just grappling with all these things. All I can say is, first,
keep
to all
going.
Americans, vote. Because this time you may not get a chance again in your lifetime to do something that actually has an impact. And
absolutely.
and think about the way that pandemics and global warming and fires are all connected to the way that we're interacting with ecosystems
and how we
using the planet, unfortunately.
And also how obvious it's become that good leadership can lead to good results, and the opposite is true too. So we really do need to take.
Yeah, whether you love those choices or don't, it doesn't matter. It's a step in the right direction.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you for inviting me, Victoria.
Of course.